Again, I'm Chris Bjork. I'm the Chief Estimator for Hoffman, for our Seattle office here at Hoffman Construction. So I get my fingers in virtually every project that runs through our office. Little roadmap as far as where we're going to go. I'm going to talk about what I feel are some of our estimating best practices, especially with regard to bidding work. In typical GCCM environment, all the work does have to be bid out. So whether you're bidding as a third tier or bidding as a prime, the way that we procure the work is through a competitive bidding process. We're going to talk a little bit about some specifics with GCCM, and then get into some specific scopes of work. When we get into the specific scopes of work, if you guys have questions, feel free to chime in and ask them. I'd kind of like it to be a little bit more interactive at that point. So let's get into bid strategies. First thing that I would say about bid strategies is the site investigation. Go to the site, look at the site. A wise man told me once to never bid on a project that either you haven't been to the site or someone who's intimately involved with putting the estimate together has been to the site. Because you need to know how the work is going to be run. You got to be able to plan your work. And when you get to a job site, sometimes something like an overhead power line that looks completely out of the way on a set of plans, when you get to the site, you realize that that's right in the middle of your way, and you don't have the clearances. So what you need to think about when you go to a site is how you're going to get materials in. Visualize what that site is going to look like when your work is going to be performed. If you're more of a finished trade, you're further along in the project, that site is going to look different. You're going to be dealing with other trades around there. So knowing how you get equipment in, get materials in, how you get your labor in and out of the site is very key to making sure that you put together a very accurate bid. The next item is really to go to the pre-bid. Pre-bids are very helpful. You get some more insight. You get to hear from us on what is important to us about the project. We'll go through the bid scope. We'll do a site walk. You'll hear from our superintendents. You'll hear from our project managers. You might hear from the owner and our client. You'll hear a different perspective on what's going on the job site, and that's important because the more information you get when you're putting together a bid, the better your bid can be. You'll also be able to see who your competition is. And that's when you're bidding work, knowing who your competition is important because they have tendencies that you may know about. And you'll be able to formulate an opinion on how we put together a successful bid. Knowing your logistics, and that's everything from how am I going to get that labor to the site? Is it a situation where there's off-site parking and the general contractor is busing in? And we do that on some projects. Some projects, the parking may be well off-site, and you need to realize that if you're like on a University of Washington job, you may be parking out by the stadiums and the work may be completely across campus. Those are things you need to be aware of when you put together a bid. But it's also how am I going to do the work? How am I going to get my materials to the place where I'm going to do the work? A great example of that is on our U-250 Sound Transit project, which is the light rail station at University of Washington. It's 100 feet deep, underground light rail station. It's about 400 feet long. If you were doing the masonry, the block masonry on that project, you would need to know that the access points for getting material in are in the center of the project. So you would need to be taking that block, your pallets of block, and going possibly up to 200 feet in either direction. So it's not as simple as just forklifting it into right where you're working or craning it into where you're working and going about 50 feet down the road to get it there. There's a logistical plan that you need to think about, and when you plan that work, so that when you go and you are successful, you can go work that plan and have a successful project at the end of the day. Reading the bid scope. At Hoffman, we take a lot of pride to really put together a complete, defined, specific bid scope for all the work that we put out to bid. You you'll get into sometimes specific details that we want you to include, we don't want you to include. And that's important because you need to, if you're bidding certainly if you're bidding as a prime, you need to know exactly what I need to do to have a complete bid. And if there's a question on that, you need to ask a question because we do our best, but sometimes there's things that are conflict, and that's where asking the right questions, which is the next point, comes in there. Now, if you are bidding as a third tier, so if you're bidding to a prime contractor, what you need to do is you still need to know what your scope is. And every prime is going to want you probably to have a little bit different scope. So you need to work with that prime and talk with them to know what they want you to include and what they don't want you to include. Because on bid day, as we get closer to bid day, the paper's flying. When we're putting together a bid, as that gets closer to that bid time, it's organized chaos. And if I know what scope I want from you, and you've put that scope there, then it's a plug and play with your price. If it's different and I have to go through and look at all your exclusions and I'm not sure what you're including and what excluding, that takes time. And you want to make it as easy on the general or the prime contractor that you can, because when you've got bids coming in, sometimes 5, 6 a minute, and you've got to process all that in a very short amount of time, it's very helpful for us. And then asking the right questions is the final point that I'd make on best practices, and that's making sure that you ask good scope questions. You never want to ask a question as a bidder that gives away your bid strategy. But you want to make sure that everyone's playing off the same field. And if there's a conflict, say, between specs and drawings, or there's a conflict between the drawings themselves, maybe the drawing says one thing and detail says another thing, well, that's an opportunity where two bidders can have two different interpretations. And in that situation, you want to ask a question because you want to make sure that all the bidders are looking and bidding the same exact scope of work. Because then there's no hassle at the end, there's no he said, she said. So as we're doing estimates, we like to get experts in your field, which you guys all are, having experts in the field to help us budget and verify that we're looking at the same thing. Then we would want to know alternate systems. We would want to know different ideas on how we can save money or provide a better quality, because that's doing a service to our clients, and our clients appreciate that. If it's a bid situation, one thing about GCCM is typically when you read that bid scope, it'll tell you exactly what to include and what to not include, and typically you don't want to deviate. You can't deviate from that, because typically, most of our bid packages will say, this is the scope that you are to bid, and it needs to be complete. Having a value and engineering idea like that may be something you want to talk about if you're the successful bidder, or if you have an idea that's, say, a substitution request type thing, type item where you want to get it a system pre-approved, then there's a process during the bidding process to work that. But with the budgets, what it helps with you is that you get familiarity with the project. You get to see the project early on. You get to start formulating a strategy on how you might be successful at the project. It also gets you, in the process of getting familiar with the project, you might determine that, hey, this is not maybe the right project for me. This isn't a good fit for my company. And at that point, now you know that early on, and you're not going to waste time, chasing a project and going through a bidding process for a job that isn't the right one for you. We all put together bids. Bids cost a lot of money, and when you're not successful, it's overhead. So if you can determine early on that this is a project I want to chase, this is maybe a project that's not as ideal to chase, that's good information for you as a bidder to make sure that you're operating as efficiently as you can. When I'm looking for budgets, the things that I'm looking for, I'm looking for some detail. I'm looking for your opinions on things. So I like to see quantities. If you're in a jam, and we all certainly can get busy at times. If you're in a jam, I'll give you what quantities we've seen. But typically I like to see you take off your own quantities because that gives me good insight on whether you're seeing the job the same way that I'm seeing the job. And if I think there's 10,000 square feet of wall and you think there's 20,000 square feet of wall, now I want to know that because you may be seeing something based on your expertise and your experience that I may not be seeing. Or I may be seeing something that you're not be seeing. It can go either way, and that's information for good information for both of us to make sure that we're putting together the best budgets, best estimates. Yes.
Would this be one of the questions you would have to ask, calling or email?
Well, those are one of the things that in a budget situation where you would just email me or call me, because in a budget situation it's not it's not a regulated system. So unlike a bid, which has a very formulated process that we adhere to make sure that everyone's on the same level playing field. In a budget, there's more of a dialogue because you're not going to be held to a budget number. We want to see what your opinion is and what it's going to cost, but we want to see the quantities, we want to see the unit price, we want to see the total dollars. And that's very helpful for me because a lot of times once we put our estimate together, I'll be sitting in a meeting with the architects and the designers, the client, and they'll start asking me questions. Hey, what if we switch out the tile and go with the resilient flooring? And if you've given me all that information, then I can really work up things on the fly and give our clients good feedback and immediate feedback. And that's helpful for our clients. Our clients appreciate that. So getting that level of detail is very helpful for us. And what we were looking for is a reasonable cost of the project. We don't want it loaded with a lot of contingency in it because it's early stages of design. We don't necessarily want you to sharpen your pencil so tight that you'd be hitting margins that you may not be comfortable with when you give me a budget. We want us to have a good, solid, reasonable price of what you think the work is worth. Moving on, who am I bidding to? And that involves, are you bidding as a prime, or are you bidding as a third tier and bidding to a prime? If you're bidding to a prime on Hoffman, you need to be looking at that bid scope. That's when you need to fill out the bid form, sign the bid form. You need to know, what are the requirements that you need to, what other things you're going to need to turn in with your bid form. Bid bonds, cashier's checks. What is the form of the bid? If you're bidding to a third party, a third tier, then you need to talk with that prime contractor to make sure that you're giving them what they need. Because the rules are a little bit more flexible there because you're not signing a bid form. The prime contractor is going to be turning in the bid. You're just bidding the prime. Yes?
One of the issues, generally speaking, with bidding, like we will be the tier 3 you're talking about, and when we are bidding we do asphalt.
Okay.
So when we do that, of course, we look at the drawings and we look at the specs and we look at everything, and that check our items and whatnot. But sometimes, like you said, there is a possibility of substituting one material for another, especially when there is filling and stuff like that.
Right.
I remember we had a problem with the University of Washington where we're asking for a CIF number, and then they said, well, we don't have, the quarries were telling us we don't have that. So we have to ask for an alternate. And of course, the architect said, no, this is what we want. So we had to go through the whole rigmarole of finding out that the other material specs and presenting them to, and sometimes it's problematic, like the porous asphalt, that it's a very difficult material sometimes to apply depending on where you are and the time of the year.
Right.
So the bid bond or the bonds, is this something that Hoffman helps with?
Well, I think as far as getting the substitution, if you're getting a substitute material,
Right.
you know, you'll probably need to get some of that data, because if the architect or the engineer is not familiar with that particular data or that particular quarry, they need to see that information, make sure that they're comfortable with it.
Okay.
So that's gathering the information is something that you're probably better suited to do than we are, because you know the material and you know where you're getting it from. Getting that substitution request, if you need help trying to get that substitution request, you know, contacting one of us and just saying, hey, I'm trying to get this in, is this filled out right? You know, be happy to make sure that the form is filled out right for you, or if you get us that information, we'll get it processed, you know, as expediently as we can. I mean, we can't necessarily control, you know, turnaround times if we don't have control of the substitution request. But in the bidding process, that's what that substitution request is for. It's exactly the situation that you're looking at. Hey, I can't get this material. Here's a material that I think is a substitute for it, and it's or equal. Here's the data on it. Is it okay for me to use this? And you get us that information, and we'll get it turned around and make sure that as part of the bidding process, that gets answered and either gets approved or disapproved from the engineers or the architects.
My second question was about the bonds. You know, how,
Okay.
generally speaking, a small business will have a limit based on what the yearly is, and now they're asking for a $5,000 review from an extra CPA. So
Okay.
in order to get bigger bonds, so I'm asking if we are in a scope of work where I understand sometimes the contractor or the owner of the project blankets the insurance bonds so that we don't have to go, you know, searching for a company that, and often we cannot bid because there's a limit as to what we do.
Right. So you're talking about a little bit. Some contractors use what they would call a sub-guard insurance policy, where basically the general contractor insures the bonds themselves. That's actually not allowed in GCCM work by RCW. So RCWs, we are required to bond the subs per the RCWs. With regard to GCCM work, the RCWs are fairly specific that you need to have the bonds.
So we have to go to the senators to change that.
Yes.
And we could do that.
So knowing who you're bidding to, so you know, if you're a third tier, making sure that scope's right, because you want to make sure that prime is, you're getting him the best information. The last thing, email, fax, hand delivery, you know, how do I get my bid to the appropriate party and what's acceptable? And that you need to read your invitation to bid. Oftentimes, you know, we will require a sealed bid that needs to be stamped at the bid by our bid clock prior to the bid opening. If that's the case, then you need to have it either couriered over or hand deliver it, or assuming that you are bidding as a prime contractor. Now, if you're not bidding as a prime contractor, then however you get your bid to the prime contractors, it can be email, it can be fax, it can be, you can call it over the phone. You know, but you want to know, you probably want to work with your prime contractors to know how they prefer it. Because speaking for me, as I told you, as you get closer to the bid time, if you're bidding work, things get more hectic, and quite frankly, I wouldn't have time to check my email at that point. So emailing me for a bid, especially as it gets closer to bid time, is not very good for me, because I've got to concentrate on making sure I'm getting the bid put together and getting our bid accurate. So we have a purchasing manager so that they handle, you know, help coordinate getting bids off faxes, or if you're emailing our purchasing manager, they'll get that email and that your bid or your quote to me And I'm sure other contractors are going to be set up in either similarly or different, and you just need to work with them to figure out who do you want me to send it to if you're bidding as a third tier. But if you are bidding as a prime, you need to make sure that you follow the stipulations of your general contractor, because otherwise it's no fun to spend the time to put together a bid and then have it disqualified because you didn't do something correctly as far as turning it in properly.
Some general contractors, they have recently have seen they have email address reserved or dedicated for the bids. So
Right.
So it goes to their box. Nobody can see that. There are some GCs. They have their favorites, connections. They do a lot of underhand stuff. So in order to avoid that, some good reputable GCs, they have established a email address. So you can email it. Nobody sees that unless it's a bid time. So you guys
Yeah.
have something like that?
I believe that we do. If not, I think we're setting something up like that. But that's a question for our purchasing manager, Kristen Halliday. She's we're very adamant about that. When you send us a bid, that we're the only ones who see your bid. I don't share bids. It's just not the right thing to do, and certainly other general contractors shouldn't be doing that. Moving on to some of the specifics of the different disciplines. Earthwork and shoring and really utility work would be included with this. These are some things that I would say to watch out for. Things like haul routes. Certain clients have very specific haul routes. You work at the University of Washington, you will see the haul route, and it will be very specific on where you're bringing in dirt and where you're taking dirt away. Other clients may not have as specific things. It depends on location. It depends on the particular owner and the client. But making sure that you know what those haul routes are is very important. Hours of operation, and that applies to downtown work, or it'll apply to working on a campus, on a college campus. Sometimes we will dig during the day and haul at night. You need to know if that's the case, because that's certainly going to affect your productivity some, and knowing what the hours are. And if you are, say, on a college campus and you are hauling during the day, one good piece of information that would be helpful is what the class schedule is. Because if you've ever been over at the University of Washington when class gets out, you don't want to be hauling anything or bringing in a load in at that time, because it's you think of how many students there are at the University of Washington. They're all out in the public, on the streets at the same time. It gets pretty hectic, so you want to kind of factor that in when you're looking at a project. Itemized scope inclusions. We cover things like, am I trenching for the electrical subcontractor? Am I not trenching for the electrical subcontractor? What specific pieces am I responsible for? Am I putting in the foundation drains? Am I putting in the base rock underneath the asphalt paving or underneath the sidewalks? Are these things part of my bid or not part of my bid? And that can vary from project to project depending on how we see, how we write the bid scope, which is usually determined about how we see the best, most efficient way to contract the work. And then site logistics, as I'm getting this dirt out, how am I moving the dirt around the site? How am I planning on stockpiling, or how am I going to backfill around other trades as this building comes up out of the ground? Where am I going to store material? If you're doing trenching work or shoring work and you're bringing in piling, you want to know where is there on-site laydown available. In a downtown job, you're not going to have a lot of laydown available, so you're going to need a lot of just-in-time deliveries where you bring it in, you offload it, and you install it. So those are things you need to think about. And then, of course, or with dealing with earthwork, native versus import material is always a key thing, and that making sure you're reading that soils report and seeing what's acceptable, making sure that if there's not a copy of the soils report available, you're asking a question to get that soils report, because that's very valuable, because you wouldn't want to price out import when you can price out when the ground is perfectly suitable to be used as general structural backfill.
So in the scope, we'll tell you the soil, if it's compactable, or if you can use it, or do you have to ask that question when you do the pre-bid or etc.?
Well, that's something that it will vary depending on the geotechnical report. So some geotechnical reports will be written as specific as saying this type of soil is suitable for reuse as general backfill or structural backfill. Some of them will say this is not suitable, and some of them will word it a little bit more ambiguous. And if it's ambiguously worded, that may be a opportunity to ask a question during the bidding process to see, get it in writing. Can we use this material or not?
Because I've seen like select backfill, that can mean a lot of different things.
Right.
That's why.
Well, and hopefully in the specifications they have a gradation for what select backfill means, and there's a concrete definition of that. And if not, you can always ask for that. The geotechnical report may have those gradations of the different materials, so you can reference that and compare it and see if, hey, this meets the qualifications of select backfill. So in that case, I should be able to use it. Or this doesn't meet it, and I need to haul this off, and I need to find a place to take this material. I need to import material back in for backfill. At the end of these, I've kind of got an area to open up specific questions. So if there's any more specific questions, feel free to shoot away.
Piggyback on what he said. If the native soil is a possibility, then you don't have to import. So you look at your mobilization, and your staff and your bid will be much more better sometimes, because but that is exactly where you have to go when you
Right.
have to import or export. Because if you have to mobilize and bring materials and stuff like that, and you have to haul it away from one place where it's sitting to the other place where it's gonna be laid.
Right.
So you really have to give a little bit of attention to that issue of the soils when you're backfilling or when you're bringing whatever the architects are saying. So, because it changes the number.
No, it does, and that reminds me of another good point. Is sometimes with your site logistics and looking at the site, you may not have room. You may have perfectly good soil, but you have nowhere to put it. And that is something you need to think about, because if you've got to haul it off anyway, then you can either do two things. If it's good soil, you can look at finding someplace off-site to store it and recondition it, and then bring it back in, or you can just haul it off and bring in new. And that's kind of you have to run that cost analysis during the bid to see if it makes good sense on the money side of things. Sometimes soil that's on site is not suitable as it is, but you can add some rocks to it, or they'll tell you, hey, this is good base material, but we need some more fines added to it, and you could recondition it, or sometimes you can treat it with different things. And usually the soils report will tell you how you need to handle the soil.
Would that constitute a change order sometimes? And then you have to do that paperwork as well?
Well, if it happened, a change order would happen after the bidding process, so you'd be a successful bid. And then if it's a changed condition, if it's something that you had no way that you could have contemplated at bid time, you dig down and the soils are not what the soils report said, then that's a changed condition. That's a legitimate area where you can ask for compensation on that.
So that's very often here in Seattle. It's really wet.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and then now, if it says that the soil's, you need to haul off the soil anyway, and you have to, and it's just a weather issue, then that sometimes can get grayer. And if you've been through that, you can understand that, some of that, you start getting in some of the specific contract language, and that varies from project to project, and you really just need to review what that contract language is. Is there any other questions?
I have a question. I have come across with a situation when we bid on a project, we have a set of drawings, we have a spec and addendums, and we bid on it, we got the contract, but at the same time, we get another contract of the company. Oh, by the way, this was a part of our contract, we did not see it on the, while we're bidding. Oh, by the way, our contract states instead of 2 million, we have 4 million GL, and also we have 120 hours on each and every project. We just finished a project with another big GC, but there was no mentioning of 120 hours. No, by the way, so my question is, when you put a bid, GCM or any other bid, so you have a spec book, you have drawing, addendums, alternate, plus your standard contract?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in all of our bid packages, you will see our standard contract. The only thing that will vary in that standard contract is what the actual bid scope is, and that's going to be determined by how we write the bid scope. That language is variable in the contract, but you will see a copy of our full subcontract, so you can review it. You see what the insurance requirements, what the bonding requirements are. You get to see all that information. And if there's a question, that's something that you should definitely, on a contractual term like that, you should definitely ask the question to make sure that you have the best information. Sometimes
there's addendums.
Yes.
And I've seen where even the bid date changes.
Right.
I know that when you're bidding a package, you have to acknowledge your addendums.
Yes.
So what would you say would be the best way to put the addendum and say, I acknowledge it here, or how do you want that done?
You'll need to look at the bid form for that, and again, it's going to be dependent on whether you're bidding as a third tier or as a prime. If you're bidding as a prime and you've got the specific bid form that you're filling out, oftentimes you will see an area to list all the addendums. You don't need to add the addenda. You just need to write down that you acknowledge all these, and then by signing your bid form, you certify that you've acknowledged addendas 1 through 4 that are dated at so and so date. If you're bidding as a third tier, oftentimes if you just put a line item there and say, hey, we acknowledge addendas 1 through 4, that's good enough for most GCs.
Okay.
Yes?
My question has to do with time factor. During the bid process, sometimes the prime would say to the subcontractor, our cutoff time is about 15 minutes before the time to submit. And then, as you know, with your experience, you probably know that most delayed bid comes from electrical contractors. Because we will be waiting for the vendor to submit their own lighting quote, gas quote, and other. You don't get it until a minute to deadline. And what do you do in that case? How do you accommodate subcontractors who actually have competitive bid, but then you say, well, you are late?
Well, typically a general contractor will tell you, hey, get our bids an hour ahead of the bid time, and that's so that we want to get as many of those bids in as possible early on, so we don't lose track of bids. Now, if you're waiting and your vendor doesn't give you a quote till 3 minutes before there, and then you can fax it off a minute before, if we get it before, usually by that time, if we know what kind of the low number is, so if we get a hold of that before the bid time, we'll be able to see, hey, oh, we've got a new low and we can make an adjustment quickly on that. But you know, I've certainly had it where I've received a bid, you know, 5 minutes afterwards for that, and we've not considered that bid because it came in too late. You know, it's I know it's hard for electricals. If you're looking at wastewater treatment plants, equipment vendors are the exact same way. They wait till the absolute last minute, and then they group all sorts of different pieces of equipment together and give you an overall, hey, here's my package deal, and that you've got to sort through and trying to make sure what's the low combination of everything on the fly. But always just, if your vendor's getting you something late or closer to the bid time, don't let that stop you from faxing in the bid. You know, because you may get it to us in time, and we'll see it, and you may have the low number, and I'll write you right in. The general contractor will write you right in, and put your number in there, and you're the, you know, if you're the general contractor is successful, then, you know, he may have named you even. I mean, if it's on certain public jobs, you have to name your mechanical, electrical contractor. So he may have named, you know, your prime or you or you know, however that works. But don't necessarily, I would never just not fax a bid in because I think it might be too late.
Yeah, please be very honest with me. Now, most general contractors, estimators, some will say, well, we've already sent our bidding. You were not the one we named. You know, probably it takes place within that 15 minutes window, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, 5 minutes to the time, my bid comes. I'm low. And then, I don't know, how do you make your own discretion to say, okay, well, we name someone else, but now we're going to name you?
Well, if we are naming a contractor, then we are ethically bound to go with the contractor that we named. And that's an unfortunate situation, but certainly it happens. You know, you can't deny that it doesn't happen. But if we had named a contractor, then we are bound to use that named contractor.
But sometimes, excuse me, they name a contractor, but they review the numbers again, and they might change it though.
I can't speak to other general contractors.
Because I've seen that happen in the bidding, where they say, well, this company has the award, but then they do the tallying, again, and they say, oh, nope.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And in a public process, so if you're bidding as a prime to Hoffman, it's very cut and dry. Either you've turned the bid in on time, mm-hmm. and you've got it stamped ahead of the bid time, and it's a public opening at that point, or you haven't. I mean, it's very black and white if you're as the prime contractor. So the situation that you're talking about more is if you were bidding as a third tier to a prime, or in a lump sum bidding environment, which isn't the same as a GCCM environment. So a lump sum bid, the general contractor is turning in the bid, so you're trying to get his quotes to a general contractor before the general contractor turns in his bid. In a GCCM environment, if you're bidding as a prime, you turn your bid into the general contractor, but we have to bid out all the scopes of work. So if you're bidding on an electrical bid and say they're due at 2 o'clock, and you have to have a signed, sealed, stamped bid turned in, then that bid needs to be here at our office before 2 o'clock and needs to be stamped before 2 o'clock. Whether you're here or not, I mean, you can have it couriered. Certainly some companies will have it mailed in, or they'll have it couriered over. But at 2 o'clock, that bid needs to be stamped. Then we take all the bids into the room and we publicly open them there, and the bidders are open to come and listen to that, and we'll go through each bid, let you know whether it was responsive or not, whether the bid was signed, whether it's acknowledged, how many addenda they acknowledges. There's a specific procedure that we do for every single bid so that, again, it's equal footing on everything. And there's a very open and transparent process that you use. And then whoever's the low bid is the apparent low bidder. And then and there may be some pre-award conferences and stuff as you get the contracts put together and the subcontracts put together. But in a GCCM environment, if you're bidding as a prime, it's black and white. You have to have the bid there by the time period. Yes.
So that period that you just spoke of, if you have a bid that's ridiculously low,
Mm-hmm.
do you automatically kick them out, or are they the lowest
Yeah,
bid?
that's a dilemma for general contractors that we definitely don't like to be in. But if there is a bidder, and it certainly happened on projects to every general contractor, and say they are 20% low and they are standing by their number, then I am obligated to accept their bid.
Do you call them or give them?
We call them, yeah, we sit down with almost virtually every scope of work that we bid out. We sit down with the apparent low bidder and try to go over the scope of the work as we see it to make sure that, they have you have included everything and that you're thinking about that and we certainly sometimes when a bidder is 20-30% low, and it happens that they'll find a bid error, and they'll pull their bids because of a bid error, and that's that's allotted for in the RCWs. One of the things that Dan had up at the beginning of the project was talking about bid errors and withdrawal of your bid if you make a bid error.
But that's prior to opening the packages, isn't it?
No, happens after the bid. So if you were low bid, and say you were bidding on something that was worth $1 million, and everyone came in right at $1 million, and your bid was $500,000, and you're sitting there on bid day going, trying not to have a heart attack, and then you find out, hey, you know what? I left out, say say you're bidding concretes. I left out all the ready mix, and it's a clear cut bid error. Then you come. There's a procedure that you need to follow. So you need to make sure that you follow the procedure. But we certainly have had contractors say, hey, we've got a bid error. I need to withdraw my bid, and they've proved that there is a bid error, and that bid has been withdrawn. We've had other contractors who have bid in that situation. They stand by their bid, and then at that point, we are obligated by the RCWs to accept that bid.
But the question arises, are you accepting the lowest bid, or you are accepting the lowest responsible bidder? Because the responsible, you say, okay, you are $100,000 low, are you comfortable? And he says yes. Or that's the first part. Are you going to have somebody check the second part? Is this a responsible company?
Right. And what we have to do there is we just follow the RCWs. So we would follow what's allowed in the RCWs to review the responsibility portion of it. The responsiveness portion of it is always determined at bid time, because if have you signed your bid, the bid form, have you enclosed your bid bond, have you acknowledged the addendums, those things. But as far as the responsibility, that's a much harder thing to prove or disprove.
Yeah, we just bid on a sound transit, and one company was $100,000 low, and I talked to, this project has not been awarded, and he said the lowest bidder, he said sit down, and they were in negotiation. I did some little research. This guy has 19 safety violations, and I copied that and said to the project manager, I said, you think, I don't care whoever gets the job, you think this is the lowest bidder, but is this responsible bidder? 19 safety violations.
you know, what constitutes what we feel that is a responsible bidder isn't necessarily what the RCWs classify as a responsible bidder. So we have to follow the RCWs in accepting or rejecting bids at that point. Now, there's always opportunities for a non-successful bidder to file protest as well if you feel that there's something that rises to the level of warranting a protest. You can always, that always is an option, and there's rules in the RCWs as far as how you go about doing that.
Isn't there like 30 days for?
I don't remember the specifics, but
it's
it's
about
usually
30
in our,
days.
it's usually in the bid documents as far as what is acceptable, you know, what those processes are.
Right.
I was
No,
gonna,
here-
yeah, I was gonna say that I was in another estimating class, and there was a student in there saying that on his proposal, he writes, if my proposal is 10% lower than the other bidder, than the lowest bid, reject my bid. So I don't know if he was trying to build a safety net around his proposal, so he's not too low. I know 10% is kind of a fluctuating, but
Yeah.
you know, when you see 20%, that's a big spread.
You know, and well, you know, when the market was down, you know,
Well, then, yeah.
that's what we saw a lot of that. But in that situation, you know, quite frankly, you know, on our bid form, if you can't modify, I mean, if my bid is
Yeah, it's a
10%
fine.
low, throw it out, it's not gonna make a difference. You know, it's, you have to either, if you're turning in a bid, you've acknowledged that your bid is complete to the best, I mean, obviously to the best of your knowledge. But writing that down there,
That's what he brought up. I go, that's interesting.
you know, in a lump sum environment,
That was a
that would,
lump sum.
in a lump sum environment, yeah,
To a
that would,
GC,
that's
yeah.
different because you're just telling the general contractor at that point, hey,
Cover me, yeah.
yeah, throw me out if I'm not, you know, anywhere close to being
Close to
right
the
on
budget,
this
yeah.
thing. But in a GCCM environment, it's a bidding process, and if you're bidding as a prime, you know, then you've submitted that bid, and if you are low, either we have to take that lowest responsive bidder as per the RCWs.
Out of curiosity, usually there's an engineer price or an engineer estimate,
Yes.
and of course when the economy was in the dumpsters, you could see
Yes.
the engineer up here and the prices were like down here. So what would you consider is a normal spread that would be nowadays above the engineer estimate or under?
You know, I can see things, you know, 5% low to 5% high, but it really varies a lot because, you know, an engineer's estimate could be missing something too. So the best rule that I know as far as, you know, where your accuracy of your bid is have you gone through your bid? Have you looked at all the quantities? Have you checked your bid? Have you cross-checked your, you know, however you put your bid together, whether it's spreadsheets, whether it's manual, you cross-checked your numbers and make sure that everything's adding up right. That's my best check of where that number is on bid day. But you know, the bid spreads also depends on the discipline. I mean, earthwork is one thing that there can be a much wider spread because, you know, if one contractor has a place where he can dump the export for free, and everybody else has to pay for something, that's when you get into what a bid advantage is and what a bid strategy is.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And how do you tell if someone's bid is low? By just looking at it, or can you tell if they're not?
In the GCCM environment, it's pure numbers. So you have a bid form, and it'll come up to a total bid, and that's what we're evaluating. And so we put together a sheet that has all the bidders on it, and you'll see all the different bidding values and who bids what, and you'll be able to see who low.
So you guys already know what you want this bid to be. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we know what scope we want it to be. So if this is, I mean, again. This is if you're bidding as a prime. So if you're bidding the utility scope to Hoffman or any other general contractor on a public GCCM setting, you will bid the work. They'll have a bid tab, which is basically all the bidders lined up with the bid form, and they'll write in as they open up all the bids, they'll write in the values for each bid and total them. And from that, you'll be able to see it's a mathematical exercise. Somebody's low.
So you only go by the other bidders, that's what you use as knowing that they're low, not by a standard, this bid, everybody's supposed to be right or wrong in here, but this guy is so ridiculously low, or
No,
go by everybody else and then you look at that.
It is the value of your bid that you've submitted, and whoever's the lowest bid in that scope of work is the apparent low bidder.
So quick question, so if everybody, mostly everybody is calling for prevailing wages and paying that, and somebody comes in ridiculously low, who's checking to see if they're paying prevailing wages? Anybody?
That's part of our responsibility as a general contractor and as a GCCM is to make sure that they filled their affidavits out of intent to pay prevailing wages if it's a prevailing wage job. When we handle making sure we get all those in, if we make sure that if it's a prevailing wage job, we make sure that the contractors are paying the prevailing wage.
Well, an intent in doing it is.
Well,
You would not get the money released.
yeah.
This is a post, unfortunately, in this case, it's a post-award kind of deal. So, they've gone through the process, they've issued, their contract. That contractor or subcontractor is supposed to be sending, the intent of affidavit, or excuse me, the intent to pay prevailing wage. Without that, they cannot get their payments processed. And then at the conclusion of the project, they're supposed to be submitting that affidavit of wages paid, and that's what catches them. So if they are irresponsible, the next opportunity, the state, the union, or whomever, is coordinating the labor part of their project, they will definitely feel the pain.
In typical design bid build, there will be an engineer's estimate, right? So when
Right.
the bids come in, and then you compare against engineer's estimate where
Yes.
if somebody's way out of line. But in this scenario, do you have something to compare against, or you're just comparing it against each other?
No. Yeah. We have a bid estimate for all the work that we bid out. So there is a bid estimate. You'll be able to see where your bid was against the bid estimate. But as far as who the apparent low is, it's based on who's the low.
Well, I mean, that's a relative
Yeah,
term.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Yeah,
Do
we
you make that estimate of the budget by yourself? Because we give a lot of big companies budget numbers, like
Right.
6 months or 1 year ago. So they use our numbers. What you are saying, you guys already have those numbers, or you get those numbers from some other companies and utilize those? They are pretty accurate numbers.
Yeah, no, we would have our bid estimates would be formulated off our own bid, our own estimate at that time.
Their own software.
So for the scope of work, we would look at our estimate and say, okay, well our estimate says that this bid it should be worth this amount of money, and that would be our bid estimate value that we would plug in. Let's move on here to landscape and hardscape. And first item, good question. Is it a prevailing wage job? Is there a PLA with the job? Is it Davis-Bacon wages? Needing to know what that information is very important so you get your wages right. With landscape, hardscape, there's a lot more diversity of union versus non-union type jobs, so that's where you need to know what the wages are in effect for the bid. Here's what is the bid scope, and can I include more than one scope in my bid? So, landscape, hardscape is one situation, and finishes are sometimes another situation where, with certain clients, we can put out a bid and say you will have curbs, we'll have sidewalks, unit paving, landscape, hardscape, and you can actually choose which of those scopes to bid to, and there's some flexibility there. That's not always the case, so that's why it's important to read the bid scope. Sometimes it'll be specific to your bidding landscape, and landscape includes all the topsoil, the irrigation, and all the plants. It'll let you know as far as what paving is included. Is it just asphalt? Is the asphalt with the civil contractor? The curbs with the civil contractor? It kind of gets into the site concrete scope delineation. What flat work is included? What site walls are included. Sometimes the site walls will actually be with the building contract. So if they're like have big, large retaining walls. So you have to read that bid scope to make sure that you know what it is you're bidding, and you get that correctness of and accuracy in your bid. Access and coordination with the building trades. So if you're a site or landscape, hardscape contractor, if you're in that realm, we're still doing work inside the building, and so there's still going to be deliveries. There's still going to be labor and coming in and out of the building. So making sure that you plan your work with that in mind, and knowing how you're going to work your plan to make sure that you don't interrupt the rest of the building, because that's key. The key thing is to always make everyone efficient, and if everyone's efficient, then the job's running very smoothly. The last thing here is what's the expected level of finish for site concrete. That is very key, and that involves doing your mock-ups, planning for your mock-ups. It might involve at the bidding, and during the bidding process, asking the question to the architect, hey, what is the expectation of finish on walls, on flat work? What is the architect expecting it to look like, or what is the owner expecting to look like? What is the GC expecting it to look like at the end of the day? Because as you get into construction, a lot of times that's where you start getting into issues of disagreement. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And if everyone's on that same playing field at the beginning, and you understand what the expectations are, everyone's miles ahead. Yes.
That's a question. Where is the RCW on grade release, whether depending on weather?
I'm not sure where that specific language in the RCWs are. It's something that you should look at the contract, look at the bidding as far as any kind of weather related and what those provisions are, and you can look at the RCWs too. I'm just not familiar with the RCW in that level of detail.
Sometimes if you're not done with a job, they can penalize you.
Right,
So-
and liquidated damages, if there's liquidated damages on a project, those will be spelled out in the bidding, should be spelled out in the bidding documents. Concrete and steel, so merely your structural packages here. Things to watch out for as far as concrete reinforcing. It's placing steel is one of those things where the support steel to support the upper mat, or ties to support spreader bars to support your wall reinforcing, making sure that you've included that, making sure that if you're a plate, just giving me a reinforcing placing installation number, that you've included that in your price. Making sure that you've given me the tonnage. Because we look at tonnages and we do our own takeoff and we see everyone's tonnage of rebar, we like to know that so that we know right away if somebody's got a tonnage that doesn't look right. Because that's you don't necessarily want to accept someone, or you want to be going in eyes open if someone has considerably less tons of steel there. And one of the ways that we cross-check that is by doing our own takeoffs and having what we think the tonnage of steel should be. And there's always going to be flexibility, and then there's always going to be a variance in that. But what you want to see is it in that range. So that's giving us that tonnage is something that's very helpful to us as a general contractor. When I say as a general contractor right now, I'm talking more for self-performed bids. So Hoffman does do our own concrete work. We have a subsidiary company, Hoffman Structures, which still has to bid in a GCCM environment and be a successful bidder. There certainly are projects where we have not been in the low bid. So it's a transparent process. It's a cut and dry process. If you're a third tier concrete, if you're bidding us a certain scope, say on a large project, a treatment plant, or one of these light rail stations, which are very large concrete projects, if you were bidding on a specific scope of work, meet with us and we want to review what that scope is ahead of time, because we want to make sure that if you're bidding as a concrete third tier, that you're bidding a scope that's going to keep us out of each other's way. There's nothing worse than being in each other's way and then both of us are not inefficient as a company. And if we're plan those scopes out ahead of time, then we can work together to be efficient and both have successful projects. So then on the steel, knowing what's structural versus miscellaneous, that should be spelled out in the bid package. Sometimes they're lumped together, sometimes they're not. Depends on the project, depends on what we see as the best way to buy that out, or the best way we think that we can get some smaller bid packages put together for better participation, so that more players can play and come to the table. But knowing what those delineations are is important. Scope beyond the structural drawings. Structural drawings, this is in regard to miscellaneous metals. The structural drawings do not contain all the miscellaneous metal. You'll find it on the architectural drawings. If it is a process facility, so by that I mean a water treatment plant, a wastewater treatment plant, you will actually find miscellaneous metal that is not claimed by the mechanical trades on the mechanical drawings. Because those are process facilities, so those mechanical drawings are actually the drawings that are most furthest developed. So that's where you'll see some iron picked up. And it's important that if there's a discrepancy, you don't know, hey, is this piece of iron in my scope or is it in the mechanical scope? Because that's where you can get some gray areas. That's an important place where to ask a question and make sure that you line out those scopes, because it can get to be a gray area on what's claimed by the mechanical trades, what's claimed by the ironworking trades, and sometimes even what's claimed by the pile butts and the shoring trades too. If you've got internal bracing, that's actually going in a project, that's actually going to be claimed by the shoring contractor, not the steel contractor. And some of that's also, if there's a PLA, some of that will be determined by the PLA as well. But knowing what that level and what that delineation is.
So you don't include architectural metal in there?
Architectural metal, you want to read the scope, because sometimes the spec will have some architectural metal in there. It kind of depends on how the specs are written and how we've written the bid package. But oftentimes, architectural and decorative metals, sheet metal things is usually at a different bid package. Sheet metal is usually defined more in Division 7 as opposed to Division 5.
Okay.
Architectural metals can be in Division 5 as well for decorative railings. That may be a separate bid package. If you have a metal base or trim, that may be a separate bid package as well.
Where do you put the bonding for reinforcement on platforms on transportation? I see that in electrical scopes a lot, but they generally don't pick the welding.
Yeah.
How do you reference that back to the reinforcement?
We will usually write that directly into that bid scope to make sure that it's clear. The sound transit work that we do has bonding and grounding, drawings, and they're actually in the electrical drawings too, which is really beneficial for that the designers actually planned and thought ahead to put those in the electrical drawings. So the electricians then can know that that's in my drawings, that's in my scope, and that'll be reinforced by our bid scope that this is to be included or it's to be not included.
Are you expecting the electrical contractor to weld the reinforcement, or the reinforcement contractor, the rod men, do the welding of their own reinforcement?
If we were to put the reinforcing and the welding into the electrical contractor, we would expect the electrical contractor to handle that using the appropriate method. So they may have a subcontractor to put in the grounding steel and the bonding steel and do those welds.
So
It may be
actually
different.
perform work on somebody else's scope materials.
No. Well, it could be, but that's not necessarily an uncommon thing.
You would think that they do the reinforcement themselves then.
Well, the reinforcement that is called out in the electrical drawings will either be in the reinforcing scope or it'll be in the electrical scope. That's going to be determined in that bid scope that we write. The welding will likewise be in either one scope or the other. If it's in the electrical scope, then we would expect the electrical contractor to handle that scope of work.
There's, I'm just,
Right.
confusion on that one.
There can be confusion on that, and on transportation things, you're right. And that's why we write it into that, try to write it into that bid scope, to make sure that it's clear. Because the clearer we can make the bid scope is, the better bid that we can get. At least from my perspective, is that, and that's what I like to see, a nice clean bid scope, so there's not a lot of gray areas. Yes?
Wouldn't that make difficult on the quality audit when an enforcement contractor goes out and the electrical contractor comes in and will that?
Well, we would be inspecting that with our both with our enforcers and the third-party inspectors, whatever inspections that need to happen on the project. We'll be looking at that to make sure that the quality and safety and the the code and everything is followed. For that.
So what happens when the enforcement contractor is out and what he has done is touched by an electrical contractor, and then he has to redo some part maybe?
Well, that would be a question that we would need to sort out in the field at that point, and that would be handled post-award between the PMs and the superintendents and the engineers and the subcontractors in question. If another sub went out there and either damaged somebody else's work or moved somebody else's work, that's something that's handled out in the field as far as. The other thing, last thing there is the expected level of finish for exposed concrete and really exposed steel as well. You know, what is that supposed to look like at the end of the day? It's very similar to the site concrete. What your walls are supposed to look like, what your slabs are supposed to look like. If it's an architecturally exposed steel, knowing what to, do you need to grind your weld? I mean, all the grinding of your welds. Is it get coated? And is that coating in the steel contract, or is it part of a coating contract? Because it can vary depending on what the requirements are from the designers even. Is there any other questions here? I'll move on to mechanical electrical. Access. So mechanical electrical access is more than just getting your material on site. It's now that I've got to get this duct or this conduit up there, and I've got to coordinate on how I do that. Do I need to use a lift? Do I need to get scaffolding? Is the general contractor providing the scaffolding? Certainly on some large projects it may be beneficial to get a shared scaffold, and everybody kind of contributes to paying for get a good scaffold there that everybody can work on, everybody can be more efficient on that project. So knowing what kind of access you have to do your work. Hangers and supports is another key thing to think through when you're putting together a mechanical electrical bid. Knowing what steel you can count on and what steel you can't count on for your supports, because there's nothing worse than thinking that there's going to be a beam there, and then when you actually get out to the field you realize that you're right in the middle between two beams, and now you have to add a bunch of hangers. And you don't want to have to put in a bunch of hangers into your bid if you're counting on there not being a beam there, and then you get out there and there's a beam that you can attach to right there. That knowing where those supports need to be, what supports are required. Sometimes on large projects, some of the pipe supports will be designed, especially when I'm thinking of process facilities, water plants, wastewater treatment plants. Sometimes, especially for large bore process piping, they'll have red iron that's required to support those pipes. And that'll be designed, and you need to know whether that's part of your bid or whether it's a separate bid package.
So what are the BIM requirements for subcontractors to you? Because still I see issues with hangers and supports, especially wastewater treatment plants where there's limited clearances and stuff. A lot of times the designers don't get adequate room for the hangers and supports, and all of a sudden you're going down a hallway or something, and not everything will fit in there. How do we cover ourselves, or what are your expectations?
So the BIM expectations, especially with regard to mechanical electrical, will be lined out in the bid documents as far as what we expect you to do, what we expect a bidder to do post award. As part of our pre-construction, we start working with the models and start trying to take care of some of those items. In GCCM, there's a provision to bring on mechanical and electrical on board early in a similar process to the GCCM as the MCCM and the ECCM process. So oftentimes we'll have especially on a larger project, you have to have $3 million. The scope of work has to be $3 million to even use the process. But oftentimes we'll have an MCCM and an ECCM on board, and they can start working and thinking through some of that work ahead of time. We will be doing some BIM work before that as well. Most designers design in the BIM environment now. So having that information is very helpful for me as an estimator too, both from being able to take off the quantities and actually visualize that project too, because when you can actually, if you work with a model, it's a three-dimensional representation. It actually has all the elements labeled in that, and you can actually take it and manipulate it and turn it around and actually really get a real perspective on what that building or structure looks like. But as far as what's going on during the bid, after post-award, that'll be spelled out in what those requirements are in the bid documents.
So if it's a BIM project, you provide in the hard bids that are coming, that you're requesting, do you provide the BIM documentation for people to base their estimates on?
That would vary from project to project, and you typically, most of the time if there is a model and it's available, there's the usual disclaimers to it that the plans and specs are the governing body. And it will depend on whether we have the bid model there. It just varies from project to project, so it's there's not necessarily a set rule with that. Along with hangers and supports, seismic, making sure what kind of seismic provisions you need to support your work, who stamps them, what kind of calculations are you required to submit them, making sure you understand what those provisions are and what you're required to do in the specifications. Fire stopping and caulking is another item, making sure that you know whether you've got all the fire stopping and the caulking for your penetrations, whether there's a separate fire stopping contractor. Certainly sometimes that's the case. But knowing what you are to include and what you're not to include is a key thing on that scope of work. And then bidding as a third tier. If you're a third tier mechanical, electrical, you're bidding a certain scope of work, talking with those primes to make sure that you're bidding a scope that they're expecting, that they want you to bid, and knowing what they want you to bid is very helpful, because it gets you focused in on what's important on that project, so that you can put together the best bid that you can and the most complete and accurate bid that you can.
So when you build your bid packages, are you trying to build those to allow for small businesses to participate with primes?
Yes, we always set our goals, and our subcontractors are very much on board with achieving those goals. We have a very good track record in achieving those goals. So we stipulate all that in the bid package. That's the idea. And with the MCCM and the ECCM, there's a little bit more opportunity there, because they have to bid out scopes of work as well, so they can have an opportunity to maybe craft a few packages that are geared towards in a more economically feasible unit. That would be maybe more beneficial to see some greater participation. That's great. So labor and material handling, what I'm really referring to here is things like traffic control on a project, equipment operators for like tower cranes or hoisting, forklifts, then things like job services where we may contract out to have laborers out there to help keep the job site clean and look at safety type issues as well. So key things here, how many people and how long? Knowing what that scope of work that we're asking for. If we haven't spelled it out, that's a question that needs to be asked, because you need to know what we want you to price out, what material and equipment to include. Sometimes we may want you to include a crane rental and include that in your price. Sometimes we may have one of our own cranes available, and we supply the crane, and we have a subcontractor supply the operator and maybe the bellman for the crane. When what's the nature of the bid or the contract? That means, is it a lump sum contract? Are we bidding rates? Are we supplying you here? We've got X amount of man hours. Just supply your rates. Knowing what type the contract is going to be is going to determine exactly how you approach the project, and how you make sure that you have an appropriate level of fee in it, and how you are successful at it. And then the last thing is, what should I include for labor and material escalation? I mean, that's, if you've got a wage rate in a year and a half, and you know that the duration that you're asking to bid is going to surpass that, talking to the general contractor, is this something you want to include in the bid, or is this something that we're going to talk about later? Because sometimes, if you're a union contractor, what those wage escalations and what those wage adjustments aren't always known a year and out. If your trade is up for a full renegotiation of their contract, you may not know what that adjustment needs to be. So you need to make sure that you know what that scope is, and whether you have to attempt to either plug something in there, or tell the contractor, hey, we don't know what this is. Is this something that maybe we should handle at a later date? We think it's going to be about this much. Maybe you want to keep an allowance in there for that, and then we can handle that, afterwards. And that's something to ask a question about. Talk with the general contractor or the bidding agency about that.
Like prevailing wages, when you bid a job, this prevailing wage today is X amount, but by the time you awarded the bid and start the job, the prevailing wage is probably changed. How do you handle that?
I believe that the prevailing wage at the time of bid is the prevailing wage that is for that project. So if you bid at that prevailing wage, that's what that prevailing wage is. When we bid as Hoffman Construction, we're signatory to the carpenters, so we are bound by our union agreements. But for prevailing wage jobs, that prevailing wage is usually spelled out for the project.
The prevailing wages change pretty much something every day, so.
That's why you have, contingency. You add the contingency to your bid, which is some figure that you have to figure out that you're comfortable with,
Right.
that might have some of these issues.
Right.
Because we could have that problem escalation with the price of oil and the asphalt, and sometimes, how movable it could be. So there's been times where the escalation has to be kind of foreseen.
Right, and that's sometimes, that's a good point with the material escalation. You need to look at the contract language and the bidding documents, because sometimes there is actually an escalation provision and in there where you tie the price of, say, oil or the price of concrete to a index, a national index, and if there's escalation that happens, if it's over a certain amount, then there's a contractual mechanism to get paid so the price of the escalation. A lot of bids you need to look at that, because it's not always there, and sometimes you're required to take the risk on the escalation. And that means that you need to factor to your best of your ability, and I have to do the same thing. Is when I put together an estimate, I have escalation in there, and we all, if we're all have a little bit better crystal ball in our specific trades than maybe say someone who's not in our specific trades about what that escalation is going to be. But we know that it's a crystal ball, but the mechanisms that we have to procure the work, you've got to take either, if there's not an escalation clause, you have to take that risk on it, and I have to take the risk as well on our guaranteed maximum prices for on the overall GCCM contract.
Usually, what I recall from bidding is that usually they tell you when you're supposed to start and where you're supposed to finish.
There should always be a schedule involved
Yeah.
with the bid, issued in the
Yeah.
bid package.
So
And if there's
that
not a
would-
schedule, you should certainly ask for a schedule so that you know where your work's happening, because, for instance, on some of these sound transit projects, we may bid these out towards the end of the year, but the work may not start for a year. It may not start for 6 months, so you need to plan when that work is occurring so that you can accurately put together your bid.
The escalation should be contemplated in that.
Yes.
When is the work to be started?
Right, and we do that as a general contractor. Oftentimes when I'm getting, even when I'm getting budgets during the pre-construction thing, I ask the subcontractors to just price it out in today's dollars. So don't put any escalation on it, because I've got a escalation factor I'm putting on it over there, and so I'm gonna take that risk on. And we've gone through the highs and lows with escalation, so we really, we take a pretty detailed look at what that escalation should be and try to, factor in when different scopes of work are gonna occur, so that we can make sure that we do that the right way and handle that the right way. Finishes, and again, yes?
Sorry, I had a question. Like, if your subcontractor is having his own contingency and you are having your own contingency, doesn't it affect you in being the lowest bidder?
Well, we have, so as far as contingencies go, in a GCCM estimate, when we've settled on a guaranteed maximum price, there's two types of contingencies, really. Three types of contingencies. There's escalation, and escalation is a function of time. There's design contingency, and design contingency is what we call, that allowance that we have as the design progresses to fill in the holes into the details. So by the time we get to a GMP and we're bidding work, that's actually down at zero, because we shouldn't have any of that. It's completely designed. The last piece that there's a risk contingency allowed in the GCCM world, and the risk contingency is a construction contingency, and the uses for that are specifically spelled out in the owner contract, covering things of coordination, because as a GCCM, our estimates are actually required to connect the dots. So, if there's, say, a drain shown on the architecturals, but there's no plumbing shown to the drain, on our estimate, we're required to make sure that we have that plumbing in there. That's what we have to do as a GCCM. The bidding documents, you bid on what's on the drawings. It's a competitive bid. But that's what some of those contingencies are for. So any contingency you would have in your bid is going to be your discretion on, how you attack the bid, and how you strategize the bid, your bid as far as trying to procure the work. And that's kind of a risk reward analysis that every company needs to do for themselves, and what your appetite is. And we do the same thing if we were bidding work. We have to see, hey, what's the right number to put in here? Is there areas of risk? Do we need to allot for on a water treatment plant? You should allot for epoxy injection of the walls, because you can form it right, you can pour it at the right rate, you can have all your water stuff in there right, and when you do your water test, it can still leak, and then you got to go in with epoxy injection and fill where it's leaking with epoxy. And a contractor who's done that work before knows that that's something that I need to plan for. But that's what you need to do. Does that answer the question? Okay.
When you're bidding on finishes, say like in a solid waste facility, a common specification is applying both a intumescent coating and a special corrosion-resistant coating, and both manufacturers of each one of those systems kind of nullifies their product if the other one's applied with it. So if I was a painting contractor, how do you deal with that?
You ask a question at that point. If you know that there's a conflict between dissimilar materials, or that's an area where you need to ask a question, because that's something that's you want to know going in, and make sure that, because the designers may not understand that, and it could be a cost implication. So asking that question, make sure that everyone you get the right process and the product in there, in the right application. And if that hasn't been sorted out at bid time, then the question really should be asked at that point.
Never sorted out.
You try your best to do that, but if I was bidding and I saw something like that, that's a question that I would ask.
And usually one manufacturer, just for the sake of argument, a primer, and you have the top 2 different codes.
Mhm.
They check and they can, if the products are compatible, so one manufacturer writes a letter that this is compatible with the top
Okay.
codes. So that happens too.
Okay, that's another way to get around it. That would be something that's probably, it could be done pre-bid, but it could be done post-bid as well.
Post-bid too, no issue.
Yeah.
It's on the South Transfer Station, that's why Mortensen erected the building halfway and then had to deconstruct it
Mhm.
and take it off and have it coated and then reassemble it.
Yeah.
Very expensive.
Right. It's a situation nobody really wants to get into. So if you see something like that, it's, that's why you ask the question. With finishes, what scopes am I bidding? This is a very opportunity where there may be an opportunity where you can bid multiple scopes of work. So we may say flooring, you can choose between carpet, resilient, ceramic tile, and craft your own scopes of work. We may not, so you need to look at the bid form, you look at the bid scopes, but you need to know what scope it is that you're bidding. What surface prep has to happen, what we're asking you to do, what are saying that you should expect as the substrate. If that goes into construction too, because if we're say that you should expect a certain substrate on there, when you go out to inspect it, you should call attention that if it's not what not what bid documents said it was going to be. And sometimes on some of these, if you're painting concrete surfaces at the time of bid, those surfaces may be out there that you can go in and look. And if you see that, hey, this is not what the specs and the bid scope are saying it should be, then you can actually raise the question right now, so that the contractor can plan ahead and to what they need to do. Caulking and other transitions. So this is things like the wall, the piece of metal trim as the wall goes into the window. Who's got that piece of metal trim? Whose scope are the flooring transitions in? Whose responsible for running the bead of caulk on top of the base?
It depends.
And it depends.
If both substrates you are painting them, then the painter's responsibility. But if you are not painting, the base is coming pre-finished, then it's a carpenter's responsibility. Same thing with the bathrooms. If we are painting the two substrates, it's our responsibility. For the tubs and all those, it is plumber's responsibility. But this is a very, very touchy subject.
Yeah, no, and I can imagine. That's why I bring it up, is because this is an area to watch out for. If it's not called out, who does what, then that's something you need to clarify. If it is called out and it's inefficient, ask a question and see why is this? Wouldn't it be better for the plumber to do this? And your GC he may have a very good reason for having the scope the way he does, but different GCs will look at projects different ways, and they have a certain way that plan, but that can vary, and you may have a different insight there that it's really inefficient for you to do, it's really expensive for you to do, and that's something good to bring up to the GC's attention. Is there any other questions? This is kind of the last slide of the best practices.